You think your neighborhood is safe until you find out just how far some HOA board members will go to enforce their rules. Some people think HOAs are just about keeping lawns trimmed and mailboxes painted, but the truth is darker. Some will harass, intimidate, and target innocent families for the smallest, most ridiculous things. And in our case, it wasn't me they came after, it was my teenage daughter. And the lengths this so-called HOA Karen went to try to humiliate her will leave you shocked. It started on a sunny afternoon in Willow Creek Estates, the neighborhood we'd called home for almost 5 years. My daughter Emily had always been the type of kid who looked out for others. She'd help elderly neighbors carry groceries, babysit for the younger families, and she was known for her artistic talent. She loved to paint, often setting up her easel in the front yard or sketching murals for school projects. Neighbors usually smiled when they passed by, admiring her work. But not everyone was happy with it. Enter Linda Whitmore, the woman everyone secretly called the HOA Karen. She had a reputation that spread faster than wildfire, policing lawns with a tape measure, issuing violation slips if someone's trash can was visible for more than an hour, and once even yelling at a 10-year-old for riding a skateboard too close to her driveway. She lived and breathed the HOA rulebook, and she thrived on intimidation. Most people in the neighborhood avoided her, some even feared her. Unfortunately, Emily had unknowingly become her next target. It began small, almost unnoticeable. One day, Emily left her bike near the sidewalk after coming home from school. I was inside making dinner when I heard a sharp, angry voice outside. Linda was standing on the curb, scowling, her arms crossed like a prison warden. She was telling Emily that bikes were not allowed to be left unattended, claiming it was a safety hazard. Emily apologized, picked up her bike and wheeled it inside. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. That was only the first drop of water before the storm. The next week, Emily was walking our dog Max along the community path. He's a golden retriever, gentle and friendly, the kind of dog everyone loves. But Linda claimed the leash Emily was using was too long and against regulation. She scolded her in front of a group of neighbors, loudly enough to draw stares. Emily came home embarrassed, her cheeks red, her eyes watery. I remember sitting her down at the kitchen table, listening as she told me what happened, and feeling a fire ignite in my chest. A grown woman had humiliated my daughter over nothing, but that wasn't even close to the worst of it. 2 days later, Emily decided to start painting. A small mural on the inside of our wooden fence facing our backyard. It wasn't visible from the street. It wasn't offensive. It was just a colorful design of flowers and trees. She was so proud of it, taking her time to create something beautiful. Yet somehow Linda found out. That evening, we got an official notice taped to our door. It stated that Emily's mural was graffiti in violation of HOA rules and demanded its immediate removal. The paper wasn't just formal, it felt cruel, filled with words meant to intimidate. Emily's smile faded as she read it. I watched her shoulders slump as if the joy had been stolen from her. She tried to hide it, but I knew she was hurt. What should have been an encouraging experience of self-expression had been twisted into something shameful. And Linda wasn't done. She filed additional complaints, each more ridiculous than the last. One claimed Emily's car, an old hand-me-down she used to drive to school, was parked half an inch too close to the curb. Another accused her of disturbing the peace, simply because she was laughing with friends outside on a Friday night. At first I thought maybe it was just Linda being her usual controlling self. But then the harassment escalated. One evening, Emily went to the community pool with her friend. Within 15 minutes, Linda showed up, clipboard in hand, hovering over them like a hawk. She accused Emily of bringing unapproved guests and threatened to revoke our pool privileges. Other neighbors whispered, shaking their heads, but no one spoke up. No one wanted to be Linda's next victim. That night, Emily sat quietly in her room, her sketchbook closed on her desk. She wasn't her usual bright self. She told me she felt like every move she made was being watched, judged and punished. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about HOA rules. This was about control. Linda had chosen Emily because she thought she was an easy target. A teenager? Someone without power. Someone who wouldn't fight back. But Linda underestimated my daughter. The more she pushed, the more Emily's spirit hardened. She began documenting everything, every notice, Every comment, every interaction. She kept a folder with dates, times, and even photos. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was building a case. And while Linda thought she was wearing her down, Emily was quietly preparing for something bigger. Meanwhile, I started noticing a shift in the neighborhood. People were whispering about Linda's behavior. A few neighbors stopped me during evening walks, telling me they'd seen how unfairly Emily was being treated. Some even admitted they'd been victims themselves but had been too afraid to speak up. That fear was exactly how Linda maintained her grip on the community. One day, an HOA meeting notice arrived in the mail. It announced a mandatory gathering to discuss rule enforcement and resident compliance. Emily looked at me when she saw the paper. I'll never forget the determination in her eyes. She said softly, "I'm going to that meeting." The night of the meeting, the community hall was packed. Families filled the rows of chairs, some shifting uncomfortably, others waiting with anticipation. At the front sat the HOA board, with Linda positioned right in the middle, her usual smug expression plastered on her face. Emily sat beside me, clutching her folder of evidence. She was nervous, I could see her hands trembling, but she was also ready. As the meeting began, Linda wasted no time. She launched into a tirade about troublesome residents and the importance of maintaining order, though she didn't name Emily at first. Her examples were pointed, sharp, and obviously aimed at her. I could feel the tension in the room rising. Some neighbors nodded along reluctantly, but many looked uncomfortable. Then Linda crossed a line. She singled Emily out by name, accusing her of repeated violations, and claiming she was a negative influence on the community. The words cut like a knife echoing in the hall. Emily sat frozen for a moment, the entire room's eyes turning toward her. I felt my fists clench, ready to step in. But before I could, Emily stood up. The room fell silent. With her folder in hand, she took a deep breath and walked to the front. Linda's smirk widened, as if she thought she was about to watch a teenager crumble under pressure. But Emily had other plans. She placed her folder on the table, opened it, and began speaking. Her voice was steady, calm, and clear. She started outlining every unfair complaint, every baseless accusation, every humiliation she'd endured. She presented dates, photos, and even neighbor statements. Gasps filled the room as the evidence piled up. Linda's confident smile began to crack. And just as Emily was about to reveal the most shocking piece of evidence, she had gathered something that could finally turn the entire neighborhood against Linda. She paused, her eyes locking with mine. The room leaned forward in anticipation. But that is where everything changed. The silence in the room was so thick you could almost feel it pressing down. Emily stood tall, her folder open on the table in front of her, every neighbor's eyes glued to her. Linda's smug expression was faltering, but she tried to hold her ground, straightening in her chair as if sheer posture alone could restore her dominance. And then Emily revealed it. She pulled out a photo, one she had quietly taken weeks earlier. It showed Linda's own yard, her car parked diagonally across the sidewalk, blocking pedestrian access. Another photo followed, Linda's garbage can sitting out for 2 full days past pickup. Then another, Linda's dog running loose without a leash in the very park where she had scolded Emily. Gasps rippled through the hall. Neighbors turned their heads toward Linda, murmuring in disbelief. For years they had endured her nitpicking and intimidation, but no one had ever dared to expose her hypocrisy so directly. And here was a 17-year-old, doing what grown adults had been too afraid to attempt. Emily's voice didn't waver as she explained. She said she wasn't trying to attack anyone, only to show that rules had been applied selectively and unfairly. She spoke about how humiliating it had been to be singled out, how it made her feel unsafe in her own community, and how she worried that younger kids or other residents might be next if no one spoke up. Her words weren't angry, they were calm, measured, and heartbreakingly honest. That was what made them so powerful. By the time she finished, the room was silent again. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of realization. People were finally seeing Linda for what she really was. And then it happened. A neighbor stood up. It was James, the friendly man who lived across the street. He said he'd been watching the way Emily had been treated for months, and he'd had enough. He admitted that he, too, had been the victim of Linda's harassment once, for leaving his Christmas lights up one day too long. Another neighbor rose, sharing how she had been accused of damaging community property just for letting her kids play chalk games on the sidewalk. One by one, voices began to rise from the crowd, each telling a story, each echoing the same sentiment. They were tired of being bullied. Linda's face turned crimson. She tried to interrupt, banging her hand on the table and insisting she was just enforcing the rules. But the tide had turned. The more she spoke, the more desperate she sounded. The more she insisted she was right, the more the neighbors pushed back. Finally, Mr. Caldwell, the HOA president, cleared his throat. He was an older man, usually quiet, usually careful not to rock the boat. But even he seemed shaken. He looked at Emily, then at the crowd, then back at Linda. And in a voice that carried the weight of authority, he said, "It's clear we need to reconsider the way rules are being enforced in this community." The room erupted in applause. Linda sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, her power slipping away in real time. For years she had ruled through intimidation, but now her kingdom was crumbling in front of her. Emily sat back down beside me, her hands still trembling, but her eyes shone with relief. I whispered to her, "I've never been prouder." But Linda wasn't finished yet. She leaned into the microphone, her voice sharp, saying Emily was just a child and shouldn't be taken seriously. She claimed the photos were doctored and the accusations baseless, but no one was buying it. The neighbors who had been silent for so long were now wide awake, and they weren't about to go back into hiding. A motion was called to hold a vote on whether Linda should be removed from her position on the HOA board. For a moment, the tension was unbearable. Linda looked around the room, searching for allies, but found only downturned eyes and folded arms. When the votes were counted, the decision was overwhelming. Linda was out. Her face twisted with fury, but she had no choice but to step down. She grabbed her bag, shoved her papers inside, and stormed out of the hall, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. The door slammed behind her, leaving the room buzzing with energy and a sense of freedom most of us hadn't felt in years. Emily didn't just stand up for herself that night, she stood up for the entire neighborhood. She exposed the truth, broke the silence, and proved that even someone young and underestimated could make a difference. In the weeks that followed, things changed in Willow Creek Estates. The atmosphere lightened. Neighbors smiled more, kids played without fear of being scolded, and small acts of kindness seemed to ripple through the community. Emily's mural remained on our fence, more vibrant than ever, and neighbors often stopped by to admire it. She even painted a new one, this time on a community wall, with the HOA's full support. As for Linda, she tried to hold on to her influence, whispering to a few loyal friends, but it was no use. Her credibility was shattered, her hypocrisy exposed. The woman who once controlled everyone with fear now had no power left. Eventually, she put her house up for sale. When the moving truck pulled away, no one waved goodbye. That night, Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. She was quiet for a while. Then she turned to me and said, "I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think anyone would listen." I told her the truth. Sometimes it just takes one brave voice to break the silence, and that's exactly what she did. So if you've ever felt bullied by an HOA or by someone who thinks they can control you, remember this story. Remember Emily, and remember that sometimes standing up even when it's scary is what changes everything. Because in the end, Karen got exactly what was coming.